Jackie Tantillo with you. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Should Have Listened to My Mother. Today's guest is a good friend. He's a wonderful testament to someone who is an all-round upstanding guy. He's got a huge heart, great moral ideals, fantastic dad and husband. He'll never shy away from hard work. He'll never run away from helping anyone in need. If you ever need anyone in the trenches with you, I suggest you pick Jim Lackey. Hello, Jim, and welcome to Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Hi, Jackie. That was very nice of you.
Well, it's true. It's exactly who you are, which is the best part. There's so much more to you, and that's the great part about what this podcast is about, that we're going to explore your life and who you are and how you evolved through your life and who helped you along the way to become the person that you are today.
Very interesting. Very cool. Thank you.
So you are from Massachusetts.
Yes.
You're a Patriots fan, and you like the Red Sox, but other than that, I love you.
Yes. Red Sox, Celtics, Bruins, Patriots, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
we put that
Born
aside.
and bred.
There you go. Duxbury, right?
Correct.
Duxbury,
I spent my
Massachusetts.
first few years in Cambridge, and then in first grade, we moved to Duxbury. And I was there through high school.
You have some interesting stories, if I recall correctly, about your experiences in school with some kids. So we'll hang on to that thought for a little while. By the way, Jim is 6'2", and as fit as a fiddle. He does personal training for people. He's been an athlete your whole life. You were training for the Pan Mass Challenge when you had a terrible accident. We'll get into that as well. Now, did anyone encourage you to get involved in sports as a kid? Or is it just something naturally innate in you wanted to do?
I was always very active, but my parents signed me up for like one season of just about everything.
That's great philosophy, right? That's a great idea.
Yeah, and the one I continued with the longest was hockey, which I played for about 40 years of my life.
Yeah, you played up until recently, a couple of years ago.
Until about 8 years ago when I had a hip operation, and I just decided it was time.
Did you grow up skating on ponds in Massachusetts, or were you always doing hockey in rinks?
I was playing on ponds in cranberry bog.
Oh, how cool is that?
Yeah, cranberry bogs are very cool because they're flooded in the winter to protect the plants, and because they don't put a lot of water on them, they freeze quicker than ponds. So we would often have cranberry bogs to skate on before the ponds themselves were actually frozen.
Jim, currently you're the sales manager for Handy Store Fixtures, which, and correct me if I'm wrong, which designs and installs custom point-of-sale and storage systems?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they do their own brand of a very common style called a gondola wall shelf. We make just about every structure that you'd need to open a store and or use for storage. And then we've developed individual pieces, custom pieces for people that are out of the standard, and our own line of accessories for the shelves.
For years, many, many years, at least 16 years, you were really heavily involved with Reebok. You opened up the original store in New York City, didn't you?
Yes. Reebok was opening a store, and I got hired at the same time, just after I got engaged, my wife Dee Dee, and so I moved to New York and opened the original Reebok store, and then from there I became a tech rep, and then I became more involved in retail marketing, team sales, and specialty sales with the colleges, anywhere from football, baseball, basketball, lacrosse, specialty stores like tennis and running.
That's fantastic. How exciting.
And then I moved into retail sales where I was selling to retailers.
You started training. You're an avid bike rider. You started training for the Pan Mass Challenge. And then something pretty dramatic happened in your life.
I was training for Pan Mass Challenge in May of 1989, which actually, and I got hit by a car on the way home from 20-plus mile ride, and an elderly man took a right-hand turn, and I went up over the hood of his car and landed face first on the asphalt. So, yeah, it was a pretty serious accident. Probably saved my life. It was the first day I ever wore a bicycle helmet.
Get out of here.
No.
You never had worn a bike helmet before?
No.
Well, the Pan Mass Challenge, you do either do like up to 190 miles a day, right? Some of the days?
192 miles in 2 days. The first day is 108, and it goes from Sturbridge, Mass. to the Cape Cod Canal, and that day ends at the Mass Maritime Academy. And then you stay overnight, and the next day you get up before the sun rises, and you finish at Provincetown. So you've gone from Sturbridge, Mass., which is western Massachusetts, all the way to the tip of the other end of Massachusetts.
And this race, they raise millions of dollars for, is it the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute?
Correct. I think last year's total was $52 million, somewhere around there.
That is very cool. But you know what? Your angels were with you that day, and they told you to put the helmet on.
Yeah. I knocked my 2 front teeth out, jammed my jaw up into my skull. I ended up displacing all the cartilage between the jawbone and the skull.
Have you been on a bike much since?
Actually, I ended up doing, that was early on in my Pan Mass. Like I said, I think it might have been training for my first, which I didn't do, or my second. And then I actually ended up completing 11 of them.
No
I did
way.
only about 3 or 4 total prior to 2000, but then my mother died of cancer in 2000 and kind of got me back going on it. So I've done 11 of them.
Yeah, I was going to ask you why your interest in an organization that helps raise money for cancer.
My mom died of cancer. My best man's father died of cancer. And he was like a second dad to me. And I think the first time that cancer really gripped me was I was just a little kid in elementary school, and I went to the wake of my great aunt who died of lung cancer. Just seeing what cancer does to people. And since then, I've known quite a few people that have died. But
It's terrible. And the journey through it is not pleasant either. Jim, could you please tell us your mom's name?
yes, Geraldine Louise Good. That was her maiden name.
And your parents were married for how long?
My parents were married 18, 19 years.
They divorced.
Yes. Separated my senior year in high school.
Oh, it's the worst. It's never easy, but it's just really rough. So you were with your mom after the divorce?
Yes. I stayed with my mom, with my sister, and my mother had a hard time. It wasn't the divorce necessarily, but it was a difficult time in her life.
We're going to tread into the mental illness phase of your mom, of this conversation.
Well, that's probably when it really reared its ugly head, and my mother was having difficulties dealing with reality and wasn't exactly providing for my sister and I. And even when I went to college, I would have to send money home so that they could buy heating fuel or things like that.
You went to Boston College.
Correct.
So she was no longer really the adult. You were the adult, right?
Yeah, I would say I was trying to keep an eye on them while going to school, and I put myself through BC, and I lived at BC. I got a little bit of money every year from my dad, but it was like not much. So I basically put myself through school, and I would also end up having to help her either with a car or fuel, money for the gas, oil for the house, things like that.
It's interesting because Rick, my husband, his mom went through the same thing after the divorce. More or less adult onset of paranoid schizophrenia. Was your mom diagnosed?
My mom was diagnosed as what they always put it as was a thought disorder. My mother was a polio survivor, and physically she didn't have any symptoms after effects of the polio. But one I learned later was that often people who survived polio had mental health issues later in life. So a few years after I graduated college, I ended up having to put my mother into a hospital against her will because she was making my grandmother very uncomfortable and putting demands on her and showing up. And that was really when I was able to get my mom assessed.
So you're in your 20s, mid-20s?
Yes.
And you had to have your mom committed?
Right. So I had to go to court and speak to a judge while she was there. And so she stayed in the hospital for, I think, might have been a year, and then we would take her out. And when they could no longer keep her, they let her out, and she was given medicines. And she didn't stay on it for very long. And consequently, I didn't always know where my mother was staying or living at different times. But when my grandfather died, she was inherited some money, and that was put into a trust, which my sister and I controlled. So then we set her up in more stable housing arrangements. And she basically cared for herself. We tried to care for her as much as we could.
So as a young child, she was the spectacular mom that you loved tremendously.
Oh, she was, yeah.
She was your rock.
Way ahead of her time. She went to, she had a high school education and had me immediately. She was still a teenager when I was born, and so she went back to school in my teens and started at Massasoit and then went to Stonehill, transferred to Stonehill, and then she graduated from Wellesley. She rarely got anything less than an A, and she went to graduate school, got a graduate degree in education, psychology in Boston College, where I went.
Did she ever teach or with her degree?
She didn't. She worked for the state for a while, and she was testing, but then, hindsight being 2020, I could see there were signs of things not working right or starting to go astray as far as her ability to cope. I think she, couldn't keep jobs. She would have instead of do her job, she would try to come in and change everything and tell people how things could be better or something.
She was able to get through school, having two babies, you and your sister Linda, right? And she was able to,
Yep.
She finished high school, so then she got her undergraduate and her graduate degree. I mean, that's no easy thing.
Yeah, most of those were done late elementary, early through my middle school years. So oftentimes, like when I was at school, she would be going to school or working a job and going to school. There was a time when I probably learned some independence too, because she went from being a stay-at-home mom to more of a mom who wasn't always there either. So.
Emotionally, mentally, and physically.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you were in school, I've heard stories you tell that you bonded and mixed with all different kinds of kids. Did they give you a tough time in school initially, or you were able to blend and hang out with everybody?
Yeah, I was never in with one clique as such. I was the fastest kid in the school, and I ran track, so I could hang with track kids. I played hockey. I was in high-level, either AP or high-level classes, so I knew smart kids. And I could go to move from table to table, and I was probably, I was an athlete who had, I graduated high school at 6'2", 190, and probably my body fat was well below 10%. So,
ran the 100 and 200 meters at Duxbury High School?
I was the 100, and it was still yards then, so I ran the 4x110, the 100. I did the shot put and the javelin, too.
Oh, my gosh. You're a real Olympiad.
Right. Yeah.
So how did your character develop? All these wonderful attributes that you have. Was it your mom? Was it Geraldine that formed and shaped
she
you?
had a big part in it. She was always, one thing that's always stuck with me was, well, she would, my mom would always ask me before the onset of the mental health issues and even all the way to the very end, how was I in body, mind, and spirit? My mother was always very much about balancing those three, taking care of yourself physically, mentally, and spiritually. You know, my eating habits are attributed to my mother, introduced me to foods that I'd say the vast majority of kids never even thought of having existed when they were young.
Can you give me an example?
We were doing fondues and making our own sauce from vegetables. She was into the different colors of vegetables and matching. She would try, I knew what tripe was as a young kid, although I didn't like it. But,
Oh, either did I. It was nasty.
Yeah. We were eating mussels in the 70s, probably 10, 15 years before it became popular. As a kid, I would eat raw clams, have little neck steamers, and our family would go clamming on clam beds in Duxbury Bay, linguine, clam sauce. I had all the different kinds of meats and vegetables, and anything new she would try, and she was just a phenomenal cook. But she always said, 80% of the time you have to eat well so that 20% of the time you can have what you want, such as dessert. So.
What a smart woman. Did you spend time with her in the kitchen? Because you're a great cook now.
Oh, yeah. Because she was working back then, I would cook one meal a week. And so I started making veal palm, one because I had a lot of with pasta and salad, and I would make other things. But, yeah, I liked food, so I learned how to cook or grill. We built a house when I was in 8th grade. In the kitchen, we had a gas barbecue grill.
In the kitchen?
Built right into the back side of the fireplace, so that right in the kitchen we could grill all year round. With the flue, all brick, gas setup, gas charcoal grill,
That's cool.
Yeah, so we did things that were always different. She got our family into camping, which has been a great experience, and I've been able to share with your family and other families here. And as you know, camping's not the most popular of events, but I'd rather do that than a lot of other things. So.
Well, wait a minute. You have a funny story. Didn't you, just like you and your buddies, grab your packs and go hike into the mountains or something and then come back a couple of days later?
When the summer right after 8th grade, myself and another 8th grader and two kids who just finished 7th grade planned a trip in New Hampshire. And my friend's father was working during the week up in New Hampshire, so he stayed up there during the week. So we planned our own trip, mapped it out, bought the food, got our own supplies, and he dropped us off at the side of the road up in New Hampshire, and he was to pick us up 5 days later at a place nowhere near where he dropped us off, and we walked into the woods, and 5 days later we met him. Even though we had to change our itinerary because we didn't realize that how much food we consume when you're hiking all day. Deviated, got off the trailhead, dumped to town, got picked up by a guy in a van, and we had separated, and he said, "These two kids are with you too." I said, "Yeah." So he picked us up, brought us to town, we got more food. Then he took us to where he lived, which was a log cabin, showed us everything, took a picture of us, and said, "Come back in 20 years when you're married, just don't bring your kid.
Oh, that's so cool. That could either be really weird or it's really, really cool. Did you go back?
Yeah. You know what? None of us could remember the exact location, but it was very cool. And I think one of us, but he took a picture of us and put it, I think with a Polaroid, and put it up on his wall.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And then you found your way back to where this dad was going to pick you up.
Yep, and we were there when he was supposed to pick us up.
Would you let your kids do that today?
I think if they were able to show us, we presented it to our parents, and I was able to put it on the map of this is what we're doing. I don't know, today you'd have cell phones. We didn't even have cell phones, so if we didn't show up, I guess the only way they were going to find us is...
Call the Mounties.
Call them.
That is the coolest.
I'd want to think I would if it was well planned out and thought out. But I think things are so much more, bad stories are so much more taken by the media that I don't know if it's different or just we're that much more aware of what could happen. But I learned a lot through camping. My mom, my grandfather was a lieutenant colonel, career kind of, retired from the Army Air Force, and he had some leftovers of World War II portable dining sets of this metal and silverware and everything, and we still have it, but we used to use that camping.
I remember.
Yeah, it's a very cool set, still have it, and first started using it with my family.
Was your house the kind of house where all your buddies would come and hang out, or would you go elsewhere?
At times, my house was the house that kids would want to hang, particularly if they could get invited to dinner, because my mom would make things that were different than they ever had the opportunity to try. But I actually ended up spending a lot of time with some of my friends who had bigger families. But my house, my best man actually ended up living at my house at one time because he was having troubles at home. So if people had that type of issue, they usually knew they could come to me for that type of thing. My house wasn't the house that had the newest stereo or the big TV or the best TV. So in that way, kids coming over for music or whatever, but just to hang out and talk, that was often the case.
Well, that's the cool stuff, right?
Yeah.
They come and hang out. Everyone always hangs out in the kitchen, whether your mom was there. That's where they were comfortable.
And that happened more as I was younger, I'd say, because in my high school years, things started to get a little strange with my mom and dad, or my mom. And my dad had a hard time with it, so their relationship started to fall apart. So I think at one point I stopped bringing people to the house and would spend more time away from the house.
Did your mom's illness make you a better person, more sympathetic person, a person who's aware of other people's wellness?
Yes, I think so. I think in some ways it made me a tougher person, but who was also empathetic. But there was a time when it made me an angry person too. But I was very lucky to have a coach in high school who kind of discovered it or realized it, and I had a priest friend who did the same and helped me deal with it. So,
what was your coach's name? Was he your track coach?
Yes, he was, Reggie Clark. I got very angry. I had a lot of anger built up, and I guess I discovered this storage room in the locker room where they stored the blocking dummies type thing. And one day I ended up going in there and just starting hitting one of the dummies. And when I came out, I felt great. So I started doing it a little more often. And one day my coach saw me come out after a particular long session and said, "What were you doing?" And I said, "It's just nothing." And he noticed my knuckles were bleeding. So he took me in and said, "Come in here." And we said, "Doctor," and what's up? And I told him that I have to card it, which I used to break into it without people knowing. He said, I'll give you the keys and I'll give you some tape for your hands so you don't keep cutting yourself. So
This is your track coach.
yeah.
Oh, what a cool guy.
Yeah, and so I remember one time I said, Reg, I need the room. He said, you know where the stuff is. And one of the younger kids said, what's Jim doing? He said, never mind, go and just, shoot him on. But the thing with Reg was you had to come back in to hit the coach's room and hang out and talk with him afterwards. So.
He always made himself available.
Yeah, and then I ended up having a priest who noticed the issue that was going on, and he introduced me to another man who was becoming a priest, and we developed a relationship where he would pick me up, we'd go out for pizza and talk, and make me tell him how I felt about things.
So the anger and the frustration that you had been building up in you, was it your anger at your mom, or anger at the illness and what it did to your mom, anger at your parents for the divorce and screwing up your life and all that kind of stuff as a teenager? Or what was it?
I think it was more like not understanding what's going on with my mom, the situation, the arguing, parents arguing. In my mind, I didn't see that they were so different. It was just, they would just seem like fight to fight, and the whole situation, and not being able to make it better. I've always kind of been a problem solver, or want to make a situation better, or been the one who was asked to look out for others, or go back to when I was 10, 11 years old in hockey, and my coach told me I had to look out for the smallest kid who was on the ice. Was also probably one of the toughest, and I was to keep him under control because I was like the tallest.
He was your teammate or an opponent?
He was my teammate.
And he needed you to watch over him?
Yeah, and my coach wanted me to watch over him.
You're the problem solver.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, that's the role that you had to take on, right? In your family.
Yeah, so it was one of the experiences.
And not only the problem solver, but you also have a really hard time talking about yourself, don't you, Jim?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so that's why...
I have a hard time talking about myself or asking for help. So.
You do. So that's why this interview, it's fascinating because there's so much more that can come out. And that's why we're doing it, so we can all help each other, right? Help each other with our experiences. Now, did your dad understand what was going on with your mom? Did he realize this was a mental illness that was budding here?
No.
So it was just them, friction between the two in their relationship. He had no idea what was looming.
No, he never seemed to really understand that part. So well after the fact.
How different it would have been, right? Today, you say, oh, my God, you need help. Let's go. Let's go get some help for you.
I mean, I guess, you never heard of people having learning disability or anxiety attacks or any of that stuff. I mean, it's just, you're just supposed to deal with it, I guess. Move through it. Well, some of which I think, is not bad advice in certain instances, but I think the pendulum always often goes too far in each direction before it comes to rest in the middle, where you understand or deal with it, between coping or dealing with it yourself or asking for help and getting help. And I think there's always a balance.
Your mom would be really upset if she knew how much this devastated and changed your life.
Yeah, but I think often, in many ways, I didn't reveal that part.
You didn't let it show. You didn't let it out.
Yeah, I mean, people often had to discover it. I mean, I once dated a girl who presented this thing to me. She said, I can't continue this with you because everybody has outside layers that you need to crack to reveal who they are. And some people might have one or two, but you're like an onion. You have just layer after layer after layer. thought about it, and I said, wow, that's a very astute observation. It probably has a lot of accuracy to it. And, yeah, so I think you put up fences, or I was always adaptable, so, not only could I deal with many different groups, but in going from group to group, I think it also allowed me not to have to reveal too much of myself.
You masked it very easily.
Yeah. So, because, you keep moving and stuff like that.
It's easier to keep moving than to face it, too, at times.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think in some ways it helped me lighten the load. So in some ways it was good, in some ways it was probably not so good. So.
What are some words that describe your mom's character?
She was definitely an intellectual. She was curious. She was adventurous. She was caring. She would probe, why'd you say that, or why'd you use that word, or I remember conversations was just coming out with this slang term just as a young kid, and I forget what the word was, but I just remember more of the conversation about her asking why use that term and what did it mean to you, or, I did a fashion show for Jordan Marsh as a young kid, where you walk the runway, and got me involved in different things. I was on different TV shows. Like,
you're a model.
Well, no, I only did it once. But
Is that on your resume?
I was also, on a float in the South Boston Parade, and we went camping, or we went to museums. She once took me to Boston City Hall to see the John Pierre Paul, who was a famous food artist, and the Preservation Hall Jazz Band, which I fell in love with. But we also did community service. She introduced me to community service, so part of my giving back and wanting to help people definitely came from her. We did this thing where there was a girl in town who had muscular dystrophy, and we did this thing where we took that girl for the day. We took her to the beach so that her family could have a day off, because with kids with those conditions, they don't have an off day. Did work in the beach, helping plant beach grass to preserve it. I did things like I was an altar boy for a while. That's something my mom got me to do. And I ended up doing CCD till I was in 12th grade, because she got me started, and I chose to keep doing it. It was that balance between just all the experience in life and all the different things it has to offer.
She sounds remarkable, Geraldine.
She was a beautiful lady who introduced me to tennis and got me to do all kinds of things. So
I'm glad that you were there to take care of her, Jim. I'm sorry that she was not, that 100% picture of what the American mom was. But I think she was unique, and she was very special. And as hard as it was, she's your mom, right?
Right.
She's always going to be your mom.
She helped me, get a foundation, which is very diverse and very complete. I mean, I am better mentally and physically and spiritually because of everything that she introduced me to. A lot of me exists because of her, yes.
Jim Lackey, I want to thank you for joining me. I'm really glad, Jim, that you, as hard as this was to talk about your mom, that you stayed with me and you stuck it out. I really, really appreciate it. I know indeed that it was very hard for you to discuss, but you are who you are in large part because of your mom. And she, as difficult as it was for her, she certainly did a great job. Thank you for being part of Should Have Listened to My Mother. I'm Jackie Tantillo.
Thank you, Jackie.